The winds howled mercilessly across the icy wasteland, chilling Princess Celera to her very core. Her once regal robes, now torn and ragged, offered little protection against the bitter cold. Every step was a struggle, her legs heavy as lead, her breath coming in shallow gasps that stung her lungs. She had never imagined she would meet her end like this, abandoned, alone, on a forsaken planet at the far edge of the galaxy. Celera's mind was numb, not just from the cold but from the betrayal that had shattered her world. Her most trusted advisors had turned against her, orchestrating a coup that had left her stranded here. The daughter of a powerful alien emperor, she was supposed to be untouchable, yet now she was nothing more than prey, left to die on a planet devoid of life. The endless expanse of white stretched before her, mocking her with its silence. There was no escape, no hope of rescue. Her psychic abilities, once powerful enough to sway minds, had been drained by the freezing temperatures. Leaving her helpless, she collapsed into the snow, her vision blurring, and for a moment, she considered letting the cold take her. But something stirred within her, a stubborn defiance. She couldn't let them win. Celera pushed herself to her feet, every movement agonizing, her body trembling with exhaustion. She had to survive. She had to find a way off this planet, even if the odds were impossible. As she stumbled forward, the wind whipped snow into her face, blinding her. Her body was shutting down, her strength fading. When she felt a soft, warm touch against her skin, she blinked, trying to focus, and saw a large, white-furred dog standing over her, its dark eyes filled with concern. Where had it come from? How could there be a dog on this barren world? The creature nudged her gently, its warm breath a stark contrast to the icy wind. Celera's heart skipped a beat. This animal, this loyal dog, was trying to help her. She clung to the hope it offered and struggled to stand, leaning heavily on the dog's sturdy form as they moved through the storm. The cold gnawed at her bones as Celera and the dog trudged through the snow. She had no idea where they were headed, but the dog seemed to know. It stayed close, offering its warmth as she stumbled forward, barely able to keep her eyes open. Then, through the blizzard, a shadow appeared, a figure wrapped in heavy furs. Celera's heart raced, her mind too clouded with fatigue to process what was happening. The figure moved with purpose, striding toward her with confident steps. Before she could react, he was at her side, wrapping a thick, fur-lined coat around her shoulders. "Easy now," he said, his voice low but warm. "You're safe. I've got you." Celera blinked up at him, her vision blurry. She wanted to speak, to ask him who he was, but her body was too weak to form the words. The man scooped her up effortlessly, cradling her against his chest. The warmth of his coat, the solid beat of his heart beneath her ear, it all lulled her into a strange, dreamlike state. She didn't have the strength to fight it. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, she felt safe. "Stay with me," the man murmured, his voice soft in her ear. "Don't give up now." But Celera's eyelids were already drooping, her body sinking into the warmth, into the safety of his arms. The last thing she saw before the darkness claimed her was the dog, still by her side, its eyes filled with an unshakable loyalty. Celera awoke to the sound of crackling fire. For a moment, she lay still, afraid that the warmth she felt was a cruel dream. Slowly, her senses sharpened. The heat was real, thick, and comforting, chasing away the lingering cold that had once threatened to consume her. She opened her eyes, blinking against the dim light. Above her, the ceiling was rough, carved from stone. The flickering glow of the fire danced along the walls, casting shadows that shifted with the flame's movement. She lay on a bed of soft animal pelts, her body stiff but warm. Across the room, the man who had rescued her sat by the fire, stirring a pot. His back was to her, but even from this distance, she could see the strength in his posture, the broad shoulders, the steady hands. The dog lay curled at his feet, its eyes closed, though its ears twitched at every sound. Celera's mind struggled to piece together what had happened: the betrayal, the storm, the freezing cold that had nearly killed her. It all seemed distant now, like a half-forgotten nightmare. But the bruises on her body, the sting of frostbite on her fingers, told her it had been all too real. She needed answers. With a soft groan, she tried to sit up. The rustle of pelts caught the man's attention, and he turned, his dark eyes locking onto hers. "You're awake," he said, his voice low and gravelly. "Good. I wasn't sure how long you'd be out." Solara swallowed, her throat dry. When she spoke, her voice came out as little more than a rasp. Who are you?" The man smiled, but it was a tired smile, one filled with a kind of sadness she couldn't quite place. "Just someone passing through," he replied, handing her a cup of warm water. "Drink. You need your strength." As Solara sipped the water, her thoughts raced. This man, this stranger, had saved her life. But why? What was he doing on this desolate planet? And how had he found her? The fire crackled softly, the only sound in the cave besides their breathing. Solara glanced at the dog, still lying near the fire, its eyes watching her with a quiet intelligence. There was something strange about this creature, something more than just loyalty. "Why are you here?" Solara asked, her voice still weak but steadier now. The man hesitated for a moment, his gaze drifting toward the fire. Finally, he spoke, his voice low. "This planet, it's not as empty as it seems." Solara frowned, her curiosity piqued despite her exhaustion. "What do you mean?" she asked. The man met her gaze, his dark eyes intense but guarded. "This place," he began, "isn't just some frozen wasteland. It's forgotten. Abandoned by the universe, yes. But there's something buried here. Something ancient, powerful, and dangerous." Solara's heart skipped a beat. Ancient, powerful. She thought back to her empire's history, to tales of lost civilizations and hidden relics. Her people had long sought artifacts that could alter the balance of power in the galaxy. Could that be what her traitorous advisors had been after? Why would anyone want to come here, then? She pressed, gripping the cup tighter as warmth spread through her fingers. The man sighed, running a hand through his unkempt hair. Greed, mostly. Rumors of technology that could reshape entire worlds, or destroy them. "I came here chasing those rumors. Thought I could find something, sell it, and disappear to a quiet corner of the universe." He glanced over at the dog, who was still watching them both with unnerving focus. "But the truth is, whatever's out there, it's best left alone." Solara shivered, not from the cold this time, but from a growing sense of dread. "And what about me?" she asked softly. "Why did you save me?" The man looked at her for a long moment before answering. "Because you didn't deserve to die out there. Whatever you're running from, it's not my business. But no one should be left to freeze to death in this cursed place." Solara swallowed hard, her throat tight with emotion. He had no idea who she really was, what power she once held, and what enemies might be chasing her now. Part of her wanted to tell him everything, but she hesitated. Trust was a luxury she could no longer afford. But before she could respond, the ground beneath them rumbled. Deep, unsettling vibration that sent loose rocks skittering across the floor of the cave. The man jumped to its feet, eyes wide. "It's starting again," he muttered, grabbing a nearby pack and slinging it over his shoulder. "We need to leave, now." Solara struggled to stand, her legs still weak from her ordeal. The dog was instantly at her side, nudging her forward with surprising gentleness. "What's happening?" she asked, panic creeping into her voice. "The planet," the man said grimly. "The core is unstable. It happens every few cycles, massive tremors, sometimes worse. Last time, entire sections of the surface collapsed." Solara's pulse quickened. "You mean this whole place is falling apart?" "Exactly," he replied, offering his hand to steady her. "We don't have much time." As they rushed out of the cave, the cold wind hit Solara like a physical force, but this time she barely felt it. Her mind was racing. If the planet was unstable, then there was no hope for survival here, Not for her, not for anyone. But as they moved through the snow, her thoughts kept returning to the man's words. Ancient, powerful, dangerous. There was something on this planet worth killing for. And she had to find out what it was, before it was too late. The journey across the frozen landscape was brutal, but Celera's determination kept her going. With the dog at her side and the mysterious stranger leading the way, they made steady progress toward a distant ridge. The tremors had subsided for now, but the air was heavy with tension, as if the planet itself was holding its breath. "We're close," the man said, his voice low. "There's a cave." As they reached the entrance to the cave, the dog suddenly growled, its ears flattening against its head. The man stopped in his tracks, eyes narrowing. "Something's not right," he muttered. Before Celera could react, a loud crack echoed through the air. The ground beneath them shifted violently, and the cave entrance began to collapse. Rocks tumbled down, narrowly missing them as they scrambled back. "Go," the man shouted, pushing Celera forward. "We need to find another way in." But it was too late. The cave entrance was sealed, and the tremors were growing stronger. The ground split open, revealing a dark chasm beneath their feet. Celera gasped, her heart racing. The dog barked frantically, pulling at her sleeve. But before she could move, the man grabbed her arm, his expression grim. "We're not leaving without answers," he said firmly. "Follow me." Without another word, he led her toward the edge of the chasm. Celera's mind raced. Whatever lay beneath this frozen planet, it was something far greater than either of them had imagined. And now, they were on the verge of uncovering it. But as they descended into the darkness, Celera couldn't shake the feeling that they weren't the only ones searching for this ancient power. And whoever, or whatever, was down there with them might not be so willing to share. The descent into the chasm was treacherous. Jagged rocks jutted from the walls, and the ground beneath them was uneven and unstable. But the man moved with purpose, guiding Celera through the darkness with a confidence that both reassured and unnerved her. The dog stayed close, its fur brushing against her leg as they went deeper into the earth. The air grew colder, more oppressive, and Celera could feel an eerie energy pulsing through the stone around them. Finally, they reached a massive cavern. In the center, illuminated by a faint, otherworldly glow, was something that took Celera's breath away. Towering structure, unlike anything she had ever seen. "It's been here for millennia," the man whispered. "Hidden, forgotten, but not anymore." As they approached, Celera could feel the power emanating from the structure, humming in the air like a living thing. She reached out, her hand trembling. But before she could touch it, the ground shook violently, and a voice, cold and unfamiliar, echoed through the cavern. "You should not have come here." Celera froze, her heart pounding in her chest. Whatever secrets this planet held, they were about to face them head-on. And there would be no turning back. The voice echoed through the cavern like a haunting whisper, sending chills down Celera's spine. It seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once, its cold resonance vibrating in the air. She instinctively stepped back, her heart racing, as her eyes darted around the vast chamber, searching for its source. The man tensed, his hand instinctively reaching for the knife at his belt, though they both knew a weapon might be useless here. The dog growled low, hackles raised, its body positioned protectively in front of Celera. "Who are you?" Celera called out, her voice trembling but defiant. "Show yourself." For a moment, there was only silence, broken by the faint hum of the strange structure in the center of the cavern. Then, slowly, a figure materialized from the shadows. A shimmering, translucent form that seemed to flicker in and out of existence. It had no clear features, but its shape was vaguely humanoid, draped in an ethereal mist. "You are not meant to be here," the voice said again, though this time it seemed to emanate directly from the figure. "This place is not for the living." Celera's breath caught in her throat. There was something ancient and malevolent about this being. something that sent a wave of dread washing over her. She took another step back, her mind racing. The rumors of ancient technology and forgotten power. Could this entity be what her enemies had sought to keep her from? Was this the secret that had cost her everything? The man stood his ground, his gaze locked on the figure. "We're here now," he said, his voice firm, "and we're not leaving until we get some answers." The figure's form seemed to waver, as though considering his words. Then, slowly, it began to move, gliding toward them with an unnatural grace. "Answers," it whispered, its voice carrying a tone of dark amusement. "You seek knowledge of what lies beneath, the truth that has been buried for eons. Very well, but know this. Once you learn, there is no escape from the consequences." Celora's pulse quickened. She could feel the weight of the entity's words pressing down on her, the gravity of the choice they were about to make. But what choice did she really have? She had already lost everything. Her kingdom, her family, her very identity. If there was even a chance that this secret could give her the power to reclaim what was hers, she had to take it. "I need to know," she said, her voice steady. "Tell me what this place is. What are you?" The figure tilted its head, a flicker of something like curiosity passing through its shifting form. "I am a guardian," it said, "of knowledge long forbidden. This structure," it gestured toward the glowing monolith, "is not of your time, nor of your kind. It is a relic of the first beings, those who shaped the stars before your people ever took their first breath." The first beings. Celora's mind spun with the implications. Her people had legends of such entities, creatures of immense power who had once ruled the galaxy, their technology so advanced it was indistinguishable from magic. But they had vanished long ago, leaving only ruins and whispers behind. This, the Guardian continued, is their final legacy. A device capable of unimaginable creation, or destruction. It can reshape worlds, bend the laws of reality itself. But its power comes at a price too great for any mortal to bear. The man shifted uneasily, glancing at Celora. "What price?" he asked, his voice edged with suspicion. The Guardian's form flickered, and its voice grew darker, colder. "It feeds on the essence of those who seek to control it. Their minds, their souls, all consumed by the hunger of the void. It is why this planet is barren, why the first beings vanished. They sought to wield this power, and in the end, it devoured them." A heavy silence fell over the cavern, the weight of the Guardian's words sinking in. Celora felt a chill run through her, the enormity of what she was facing pressing down on her like a physical force. This wasn't just a weapon or a tool. It was a force of destruction, one that had wiped out entire civilizations. "And now," the Guardian said, its voice barely more than a whisper, "you stand at the edge of the same abyss." Celora's mind raced. She could feel the temptation pulling at her, the lure of the power that could be hers. With this she could reclaim her throne, punish those who had betrayed her, reshape the galaxy in her image. But the Guardian's warning echoed in her ears. Was she willing to pay the price? "You don't have to do this," the man said quietly, stepping closer to her. His voice was calm, steady, but there was an urgency in his eyes. "Whatever you think this power will give you, it's not worth it. It never is." Celora looked at him, her heart torn. She had spent her entire life surrounded by betrayal and ambition, and yet here was this man. A stranger, someone who had no reason to care about her, risking his life to save hers. Could she really turn her back on that? But then her mind flashed to her empire, to the faces of those who had turned against her, and the fire of her anger flared once more. She couldn't just walk away, not after everything she had lost. "I have to try," she whispered, more to herself than to him. The Guardian's form loomed closer, its presence suffocating. "Then step forward, child of the stars," it intoned, its voice reverberating through the cavern. "Claim your fate." With trembling hands, Celora moved toward the monolith, the pulsing energy growing stronger with every step. The man called out to her, but his voice was drowned out by the roaring in her ears. She was so close now, she could feel the power thrumming beneath her fingertips. And then, with a deep breath, she reached out and touched the monolith. The moment her hand made contact, a blinding light erupted from the structure, engulfing her in its brilliance. The ground trembled violently, and the air crackled with energy. Celera could feel the power surging through her, overwhelming her senses, threatening to tear her apart. But as the light consumed her, a single thought echoed in her mind. Was this her salvation, or her doom? The light swallowed Celera whole, its blinding brilliance consuming her until she could no longer tell where her body ended, and the energy began. Her thoughts scattered like leaves in a storm, torn apart by the overwhelming force coursing through her veins. She wanted to scream, to pull away, but the power held her fast, wrapping itself around her mind and soul like a vice. Visions flooded her consciousness, worlds beyond her comprehension, stars being born and dying in the blink of an eye, civilizations rising and crumbling beneath the weight of their ambition. She saw the first beings, their towering forms aglow with an ancient light, their voices resonating through the cosmos as they bent reality to their will. They had wielded this power, shaped it, but in their arrogance, they had unleashed something they could not control. The void. It had devoured them, just as the Guardian had warned. It had fed on their greed, their lust for dominance, until nothing remained but desolation. And now, it was hungry again. Hungry for her. Celera. The man's voice broke through the chaos, distant but insistent. Fight it. Don't let it take you. She tried to focus, clinging to his voice like a lifeline. Her mind was fracturing under the weight of the power, but she could feel him pulling her back, anchoring her to the present. The dog barked, its growls fierce and determined, as if sensing the battle raging within her, but the void's pull was relentless. Black hole drawing her deeper into its maw. It whispered promises of revenge, of absolute power. Everything she had ever wanted. All you have to do is surrender. For a moment, Celera faltered. The temptation was so strong, the hunger for retribution burning deep within her. She could see it now. Her enemies kneeling before her, their fear palpable as she reshaped the galaxy to her will. She could make them pay. She could take back everything. But at what cost? Her thoughts turned to the man, the stranger who had risked his life to save her, and the dog that had refused to leave her side. They had shown her something she hadn't felt in a long time. Loyalty, compassion, selflessness. Was she really willing to sacrifice that for power that would ultimately consume her? No, she whispered, her voice weak but resolute. I won't. With every ounce of strength she had left, Celera pushed back against the void's pull, forcing the power away. The light around her dimmed, and the ground beneath her feet became solid once more. She could feel the monolith's energy recoiling, like a beast denied its prey. The blinding light faded, and Celera collapsed to the ground, gasping for breath. The man rushed to her side, his face filled with concern. He knelt beside her, his arms steadying her as she struggled to sit up. Are you okay? He asked, his voice gentle but urgent. Celera nodded weakly, though her body still trembled from the ordeal. I'm fine, she managed, her voice hoarse. But the power, it's too dangerous. We need to destroy it. The man looked toward the monolith, its ominous glow still pulsing faintly. How? He asked, his brow furrowed. If the first beings couldn't control it, what chance do we have? Celera's gaze hardened. We don't have to control it. We just need to end it. She pushed herself to her feet, though every muscle in her body screamed in protest. The dog stood beside her, his eyes still sharp and alert, as if sensing the gravity of what was to come. The Guardian's presence was no longer felt, its voice silent, as if watching from the shadows, waiting to see what choice she would make. We have to overload it, Celera said, her mind racing. If we can channel enough energy into the monolith, it'll destabilize. But we'll need to move fast. Once it starts to collapse, this whole place will go with it." The man's jaw tightened, but he nodded. "All right. Tell me what to do." Celara turned to the strange, ancient device. The power it held had nearly destroyed her, but now she would use it against itself. Together, they worked quickly, connecting the remnants of the first being's technology that lay scattered across the cavern. The dog stood watch, its ears perked, as if sensing the urgency of their task. With every connection, the monolith's glow intensified, flickering violently as if fighting back against their efforts. The ground began to shake, the air around them crackling with energy. Celara's heart pounded in her chest. There was no turning back now. "Almost there," she muttered, her fingers working quickly over the final console. The man stood beside her, his hand resting on the hilt of his knife, his gaze fixed on the unstable monolith. "Once this thing blows, we need to be far away from here," he said, his voice tight with focus. Celara nodded, her breath shallow. Just a few more seconds. And then, with a final surge of energy, the monolith's glow exploded into a blinding flash of light. The ground beneath them shook violently, and a deep, rumbling sound echoed through the cavern as the ancient structure began to tear itself apart. "Run!" Celara shouted, grabbing the man's arm as they sprinted toward the cave's entrance. The dog bolted ahead of them, barking wildly as the walls around them began to crumble. Rocks and debris rained down from above, the cavern collapsing in on itself as the monolith's power spiraled out of control. Celara's lungs burned, her legs screaming with exhaustion as they raced through the collapsing tunnel. The roar of destruction grew louder behind them, a tidal wave of chaos closing in. But they didn't stop. They couldn't stop. Finally, they burst through the cave's entrance and into the freezing cold of the outside world. The moment they were clear, a deafening explosion rocked the air, and the ground beneath them shook with the force of the monolith's destruction. They collapsed onto the snow, gasping for breath as the dust and debris settled around them. The sky above was clear, the storm long gone, and the frozen wasteland stretched out before them, silent and still. Celara lay on her back, staring up at the stars, her chest heaving as the enormity of what had just happened sank in. The man lay beside her, his breathing steady but labored, and the dog curled up between them, its warm fur a comforting presence. "It's over," Celara whispered, her voice barely audible. The man turned his head to look at her, his expression unreadable. "Yeah," he said softly, "it's over." But as they lay there, staring up at the vast expanse of stars, Celara couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed, something deep and fundamental. The power of the first beings was gone, but the void, it had tasted her, and it was still out there, somewhere in the darkness, waiting, watching. And one day, it would return. But for now, at least, they were free. For now. The next morning brought a chilling calm. Celara, still itching from the ordeal, stared out at the vast, icy landscape, trying to comprehend what had just transpired, the weight of everything. Her fall from power, the near destruction of her soul by the monolith, and the horrifying knowledge of the void's hunger, pressed heavily on her. But for the first time in days, the sun broke through the gray clouds, casting soft rays across the snow-covered plains. Beside her, the man packed the last of their meager supplies, his movements quiet and deliberate. The dog circled around them, sniffing the ground, as if it, too, was taking in the strange stillness that now surrounded them. The cave that once housed the deadly monolith was buried beneath a mountain of rubble, and all traces of the ancient power had been erased from the surface. "You think it's really over?" the man asked, his voice gruff yet steady as he shouldered his pack. His dark eyes met Celara's, the unspoken question hanging between them. Celara wasn't sure how to answer. The monolith was gone, and the immediate threat was over. But she could still feel the echo of the void in her mind, like a distant drumbeat she couldn't quite shake. The Guardian had said the void was endless, and while the relic they destroyed had been one piece of it, the darkness behind it was infinite, waiting for the next opportunity to seep into reality. For now, she replied after a pause. But the void, it's not something that ever truly ends. I think it's always there, in the shadows, waiting. The man nodded, his expression solemn. Then we'll keep moving. There are other battles to fight. Celera glanced over at him, feeling a strange sense of camaraderie. This man, this human, had appeared out of nowhere to help her without knowing who she was or what dangers she carried with her. She had always been taught to distrust, to rely only on herself and her royal heritage. But here, in the middle of a frozen wasteland, this stranger had become her most trusted ally. I never asked, Celera said quietly, who you really are. The man chuckled softly, brushing snow from his coat. You can call me Cade, just another wanderer, trying to stay alive out here. Not much more to it. Cade, Celera repeated, testing the name on her tongue. It was simple, ordinary, yet it seemed to carry weight in the way he wore it. You saved my life. I owe you a debt. He shook his head. You don't owe me anything. We got through this together, and that's what matters. But what are you going to do now? The question hung in the air, and Celera felt the pull of two paths before her. She could return to her empire, fight for her throne, and seek vengeance against those who had betrayed her. But something about that path now felt hollow. She had touched true power, the kind that had the potential to unravel reality itself, and it had nearly destroyed her. Could she really go back to petty court politics and revenge? I don't know, she admitted, her voice soft. I spent my whole life preparing to rule, and now I don't even know if that's what I want anymore. Cade studied her for a moment, then gestured to the horizon, where the faint outlines of mountains stood against the brightening sky. There's a whole galaxy out there, he said, plenty of places where someone like you could make a difference, without needing a throne. Celera followed his gaze, her heart beating faster at the thought. Maybe he was right. Maybe there was more to life than the endless struggle for power and control. Maybe, out there, beyond the empire she once called home, she could find a new purpose, one that didn't involve destruction and betrayal. I never thought I'd say this, she murmured, but maybe the galaxy is bigger than just my empire. Cade smiled, a quiet, understanding smile. That's something most people don't realize until they've lost everything. Celera looked at him, her heart heavy but hopeful. And you? What will you do? He shrugged, his expression thoughtful. I've never stayed in one place for too long. Guess I'll keep moving. There's always another job, another fight. For a moment, neither of them spoke, the silence filled only by the distant wind. Celera felt a strange pull toward Cade, a sense of connection she hadn't felt with anyone in a long time. Maybe it was the shared ordeal, the way they had fought side by side, or maybe it was the way he looked at her, not as a fallen princess or a potential threat, but as a person. Wherever you go next, she said softly, I'd like to come with you, if you'll have me. Cade raised an eyebrow, clearly surprised by her offer, but then, after a moment's consideration, he nodded. I could use the company, just don't expect things to be easy. Celera smiled for the first time in what felt like forever. I've had enough of easy. Together, they set off across the snow, the dog trotting alongside them, its tail wagging as if it, too, sensed the start of something new. The cold wind still bit at their skin, but the sun was rising, casting long shadows over the endless expanse. The galaxy awaited them, full of dangers and mysteries, and perhaps, somewhere along the way, redemption. As they walked, Celera glanced up at the stars twinkling faintly in the morning sky. She didn't know what lay ahead, but for the first time in a long time, she wasn't afraid. The void may still be out there, lurking in the darkness, but she was no longer alone. And whatever came next, she was ready. The ship hummed quietly as it cut through the stars, leaving behind the frozen planet that had been both a prison and a proving ground. Celera stood at the viewport, her eyes tracing the patterns of distant nebulae and the twinkling lights of far-off worlds. Each one a story, a mystery, a possibility. She had taken a seat in the co-pilot's chair not long after they lifted off, watching Cade with a mixture of curiosity and respect as he navigated through the endless expanse of space. His hands moved deftly across the controls, every action calm and practiced, though there was always a quiet alertness in his eyes. He was a man who had seen many things, some he probably wished he hadn't. The ship, a weathered but reliable freighter, wasn't much to look at. Its hull bore the marks of countless battles, the paint long since peeled away by years of wear and tear, but it was sturdy, and in the end, that was what mattered. Cade had been quiet for most of the journey, leaving Celera alone with her thoughts. It had been days since they left the icy wasteland, and while she was no longer haunted by the cold, the memories of the void still clung to her, just out of reach. At times, she could almost hear its whispers, like a distant echo in her mind. She wondered if that would ever go away. "What are you thinking about?" Cade's voice broke through the silence, pulling her from her thoughts. Celera hesitated for a moment before answering. "Everything. Nothing. The future, I suppose." Cade leaned back in his seat, his eyes fixed on the stars ahead. "The future's unpredictable. You can try to plan for it, but it usually throws something unexpected your way." Celera smiled faintly. "You sound like you're speaking from experience." He chuckled, though there was no humor in it. "More than I'd care to admit." There was a brief silence before he spoke again, his tone more serious. "You ever regretted not taking the power from that thing?" Celera's fingers absently traced the edge of the control panel in front of her as she considered his question. Did she regret it? There had been a moment, just a single heartbeat, when she had been tempted to seize the power, to let it flow through her veins and reshape the galaxy to her will. The lure of vengeance had been strong, and the thought of what she could do with that kind of power still sent a shiver through her. But then she had felt the void, the emptiness, the hunger. She had felt it trying to consume her, to swallow her whole, and in that moment, she had realized that no throne, no empire, was worth the cost of losing herself. "No," she said softly, her gaze distant. "I don't regret it. Power like that, it comes at too high a price." Cade nodded, his expression thoughtful. "Good. I've seen what happens to people who chase power like that. It never ends well." Celera turned to look at him, curiosity sparking in her chest. "You've never told me much about your past." Cade shrugged, his eyes still focused on the stars. "Not much to tell. Just a soldier who's seen too much, trying to stay out of trouble." She studied him for a moment longer, sensing there was more to his story than he was letting on. But she didn't press. They all had their scars, and some were better left in the past. "So," Cade said, steering the conversation back to her, "where to next, princess?" Celera's smile faltered slightly at the title, though there was no malice in Cade's use of it. It was strange. She had been raised to wear the title with pride, to wield it like a weapon. But now, after everything she had been through, it felt foreign to her. She wasn't the same person she had been before the coup. The title no longer fit. "I'm not a princess anymore," she said quietly, almost to herself. Cade glanced at her, one eyebrow raised. "No, then what are you?" Celera met his gaze, her expression thoughtful. "I don't know. Maybe it's time I found out." He smiled. A small, genuine smile. "Then let's go find out." The ship's engines hummed a little louder as Cade adjusted their course, setting them on a path toward a distant star system. Ahead of them lay the unknown, new worlds, new dangers, new opportunities. Celera had no idea what the future held, but for the first time in her life, that uncertainty didn't scare her. She had been a princess. She had been betrayed, abandoned, and nearly destroyed by a force beyond comprehension. But she had survived, and now she had the chance to build something new, not just for herself, but for others too. Whatever that future looked like, She knew one thing for certain. She wasn't alone anymore. As the stars blurred into streaks of light and the ship jumped to hyperspace, Celara closed her eyes and allowed herself a moment of peace. The galaxy was vast, and the void was always lurking in the shadows. But with Cade at her side, and a new path ahead of her, she felt ready to face whatever came next. After all, the hardest battles were already behind her. The rest, well, that was just the adventure.